It's very similar to ours, but only similar. We are not going to find out who is better, who is worse. There'll be references, but we'll abstract from the Soviet Union. No, that's not gonna work.
Yes, look same. Yes, like brothers, but only in appearance. We find the appearance extremely pleasant and recognizable. We had it ourselves, but the Poles had it a little earlier than we did, and it was like a new one. We had a new one, but it looked like an old one. Why? The Italian tricksters tried to win an additional market in socialist countries.
The Poles started production of their Fiats a little earlier than we did. VAZ 2101. They in 1967, we in 1917. We fought and improved for a long time, but they compromised and made everything simple.
The Italians did not want socialist cars to create competition on the world market with their Fiat, and the socialist countries were fine with it anyway, as the cars were still pretty good, especially since the designer was Dante Giacose, the man who drew the Fiat 500 and 600, well, and the Fiat 124 itself.
Appearance. It was the Italians who taught us how to put new skin on an old bone. Look, it's the same here. The doors are from a Fiat 124, well, from our Zhiguli, but everything else is new. But then again, the base of this car is Fiat 1300, 1500.
So, the contract was signed in '65, and the production of Fiat was planned at the factory of self-propelled vehicles of Special FSO in the suburbs of Warsaw, where they made a clone of our Victory M20. Progress was evident. Moreover, the Fiat 125 was more progressive than the 124 in a number of respects.
And then there's the exterior again, 125th Fiat as it is. However, after restyling, which was in 75 years, as many as 400 changes were made. In general, the Poles made changes all the time, of course more external. Hearsay, the radiator grille became plastic, not chrome.
Rear lights have turned into block headlights, resembling you-know-whos. Bumpers from Zhiguli. But they were supposed to be like the 11. But I told you that the Italians sold to Poles a simplified car. So let's say the Poles have round headlights, not rectangular. What do you think of the repeaters on the ribs? I like them.
Anyway, it was a good shell for the early 70s. Why am I going into the cabin? To open the trunk? And it's not small, it's 400 liters. It doesn't even have a lock. So what's missing here? What's missing is a tank and a spare. It's very simple. The tank is underneath like a Fiat, and the spare is in a niche. The mechanisms are all the same as ours. The only thing is that in our trunk you could fit a TV set, but here it's rather narrow. A tow bar and a socket. They called it a camper. Our summer residents became campers every fall, and potatoes helped with this.
The rear axle is spring, from Fiat 1500 as it is with reaction rods, which do not give the springs to twist and keep it straight, or rather horizontally in motion, but disc brakes. They're also on the front. By the way, we could also have disc brakes on Zhiguli, but the government considered that it is luxury and
Stax McPherson, yeah, you heard right, it's got sway bars. Thanks to Earl Steele McPherson for the suspension. But what does that mean? Which means there's one lever, a bolt, there's two. I'm not that technically savvy, but I do know that Comrade McPherson invented his plug with one lever, and there are two here. So here's the question. Is it McPherson? I think it is McPherson. It's just a clever Italian thing like this. Also, look, the amp here is very ideologically reminiscent of a Lada 8. Well, in the future, I mean.
But a Fiat 120p wouldn't be a P without simplifications. The motor is a sad design even for the late 60s. Again, from the Fiat 1300. It's not rust-proof. By the way, it was designed by Aurelio Lampredi, formerly of Ferrari. 1,295 cubic centimeters of displacement, 64 horsepower, at 200 RPM, cylinder diameter 72 millimeters. The stroke of the piston is 79.5 millimeters.
And the real Fiat had a two-shaft fancy pole from the 60s. Of course, the layout is basically something like a Zhiguli. It's kind of the same, but not the same. And the trough is native and leaf collector, so that keys and nuts could be lying here. And the air intake and the tank. Small elements are native, but in general, it's not the same. Alright guys, let's get in the cabin, but first on the back couch. Sorry, move over. I've always said, a work of art is best viewed from a little farther away. The doors are similar in width to the Zhiguli, but the back couch is roomier than the 124. Why? Because the body is 5 centimeters longer and they were able to move the backrest a little bit. Flashlights on the doors for people who want to pee at night. I think we only had them on the front doors and then at the end. Correct me if I'm wrong, as always.
The interior is Italian as it is. But again, not from Fiat 125, but from the previous model, 1300, 1500, older, which means cheaper, but it doesn't mean worse.
We have a car from the year 1982, still Fiat. In 83 the Poles with the Italians, ran out of the license agreement and the car became just. FSO 125. The steering wheel, by the way, is soft, post-reform. Why it stands here, I don't know, batons. You'd be envious of a 6.
Dashboard. And by the way, the steering wheel is injury-proof. Soft. The gear knob is on the floor. Originally, it lived on the steering column.
There is a place for a cell phone. Well done, they have already provided for it. The ashtray is wide. You can stuff a cigar in there. The dashboard is old, ribbon, but there is a blower for side windows. And it closes. It can be blocked. Glove compartment. The shelf is orthodox, as we know. On the left side, there is a sucker, hood release keys, and manual throttle. It's the mechanical equivalent of cruise control. Headrests appeared on VAZ models when? Right, there were no head restraints in the Zhiguli. But the strange thing about this car is that the car is late, but so many elements are early. I don't know what that has to do with. Most likely the previous owner, the one in Poland, which I'll tell you about a little later, just had it decorated with earlier elements of the car, so to speak. I don't know why. Otherwise, VAZ 2105, VAZ 2106, but it's considerably roomier. Look how I'm sitting. I can't reach anything. Amazing. The windows. They're fake. They don't open. Choke. That's it. I'm home. Hello, Vanya, 18 years old. This Fiat, you know what it reminds me of? If a Zhiguli married a Moskvich, it would feel like a Zhiguli. I sit like this, my knees propping up the steering wheel. In motion, Moskvich, moderately rocking backwards on the spring suspension. The only thing is that the Moskvich is more assembled, circus-like. You know, such for Moskvich show, when clowns stayed. And the memories are pleasant?
Yes, in turns it rolls as if recognizably, but more solid, that is, less sloppy. It accelerates as it should, 1 and 3 volumes forever. The maximum speed for socialist cars in 140 kilometers per hour was normal and even very much, but at maximum speed, one would like to stick the 5th speed, but there is none, only 4.
Do you know that the Italians, having developed this car for the Poles, wanted to sell it to us as number 2? That is, first we produced Zhiguli and then they offered to produce this Fiat. But we refused. We did not like the fact that the unification of 4 doors and a couple of lids for the tanks, well, not that. So we designed the Lada 3 ourselves, and it's beautiful.
But the Fiat 125P is more solid because it's bigger. For example, the Lada 3 is 4,116 millimeters long. The 125th has 4,223 millimeters. The height of the 3 is 1,388. The 125th is 1,440. And the base of 2103 is 2,424 millimeters. 125 has 2,505 millimeters. It turns out that Komod, as Fiat was called in Poland, is a higher class car. And there were also nicknames Kant and Bandita, but the most popular name was Duzi Fiat, I mean Big Fiat.
To understand, the 125 Fiats were produced until the year 2001. 30 years, over 30 years. That's my point about Zhiguli and Ladas. But here's something else interesting. 125 and Fiats were the main competition to our Zhiguli abroad. They were bought because they were cheap and reliable. The main criterion was to sit comfortably, and I agree with that. As for reliability, well, it is rather controversial. Riddle, how do you get rid of a Fiat? Douse it in rust neutralizer, and it will melt. By the way, this Fiat is for sale. It costs only about 500,000 rubles, or about $5,000.
On the running gear, however, on the metal is not. Poles rot very actively. Ours has been preserved very well thanks to the owners. The first one took it to Russia in the 90s when he was young. The second one just looks after it properly.
Now, you know the difference between a brothel and a Fiat? It's embarrassing when you get in and out, but it's nice inside. But that's not the case with this Fiat. I like this Fiat. That's all I wanted to tell you. The hunt continues.